Have you ever been in a crowded restaurant and felt like your head was going to explode? Are you one of those people that feels dazed when you're bombarded with loud, high-pitched laughter? And yet you know people who are completely unfazed by loud noises. The degree to which our auditory preferences differ can be astounding and sometimes alienating. Marcia Johnson, an audiologist who sees patients from all over the world in her clinic in Oregon, has treated children who are unable to eat at the raucous family dinner table and women who are so bothered by their husband's breathing that they contemplate divorce. So how can something as seemingly simple as sound have such a profound effect on our lives? In today's episode, we're going to talk about why different people have different responses to varying levels of sound, and whether you are a highly sensitive person who might need to learn how to handle the world a little differently. Hi, I'm Stephanie Phillips Markstein, and I help health-conscious people optimize their physical and emotional well-being so that they can show up in the world as the best and most confident version of themselves. So when sound waves enter our ears, they create a cascade of vibrations that turn into electrical signals. And these signals then travel along the auditory nerve into several regions of the brain, including, and we're not going to get too sciencey here, but including the limbic system, which is involved in the processing of emotion and memories. So disconnection between sounding feelings is one reason a favorite song can cheer us up or give us energy. Apparently, music that you like alters the neurochemicals in the brain, which helps to lower levels of the stress hormone cortisol, which we talk about all the time, and increase the mood protective serotonin and dopamine. Unfortunately, sounds we don't like can also move us, even physically. The part of the brain that activates the body's fight or flight response when we perceive a threat is why we have panicked reactions to alerts such as car horns. But if this response is set off by everyday sounds, such as crinkling food wrappers or someone chewing gum, the chronic stress can take a toll on mental health. Research suggests that between 20 and 40% of people have some sort of noise sensitivity, and it's a trait that runs in families. It's actually in my family. It also seems to affect women more than men, although there's not much research on that subject. One of my loved ones suffers from this. Clearly, sound has a direct effect on emotions, but how do you feel in any given moment can also change how loud or irritating or enjoyable or distracting a sound seems. If you were already stressed, you may be ill-equipped to handle, yet another demand for your attention. There is some support for the idea that stress can reduce your tolerance for noise. A Swedish study measured the reaction to sounds of more than 300 people before and after putting them through high-pressure tasks. Women who reported feeling more emotionally exhausted from the outset perceived the same sound as louder and more painful after the stress test. This effect, however, was not seen in men. In fact, men tend to prefer conversation, music, and other sounds at slightly louder volumes than women. I don't think that's that surprising, but another explanation for why some people are more susceptible to literal sound effects is that they are more tuned into the world around them. Studies suggest that between 20 and 33% of people fit a personality classification that researchers have dubbed highly sensitive people. Ooh, that's a technical term, right? They're very perceptive though, and they're aware of themselves and their environment, and they also have a low sensory threshold, meaning that they will react to levels of sound that may not even register with others. And when these people find themselves in a noisy environment, they might become overwhelmed and irritable and even anxious. They might want to shut down or escape. The problem is that removing yourself from an overstimulating situation isn't always possible, obviously. You can't just, you can't always just walk out on your job, or you can't ignore your children most of the time. And when people feel unable to exercise control over their environment, that can lead to the perception of being helpless and hopeless. And those are common contributors to depression. So while we joke about this condition, it's really not funny to people who suffer from it. There are also auditory processing disorders that can impact what we hear and how it makes us feel. The 11 to 15% of people affected by tinnitus, for example, are at increased risk for anxiety and depression, especially if the ringing or buzzing or humming in the ears is chronic and constant, which makes perfect sense. And then there's the more extreme issue. This is what my loved one suffers from, called misophonia. And this is when trigger noises, such as usually things like chewing, slurping, sniffling, even throat clearing, can be like nails on a chalkboard. People who suffer from this often hear their trigger sounds and experience that those fight or flight symptoms, such as heart palpitations, sweating, muscle tension, tightness in the chest, even shortness of breath. Scientists believe that the brain of these people is misinterpreting the sounds as threat signals. In fact, there was a groundbreaking 2017 study that showed that in the misophonic subjects, trigger sounds can cause hyperactivity in the part of the brain that is responsible for perceiving environmental stimuli and deciding which ones deserve our attention. But because this disorder was only recognized recently, there's still an ongoing debate about whether it's a psychiatric, whether it's neurological, or an auditory condition. People with misophonia often suffer from anxiety or depression, although the exact relationship between the conditions is not really well understood. And again, this is a new subject that they're researching. But some people live in a perpetual state of unconscious kind of hypervigilance, scanning their environment for possible auditory assaults. Over time, these visual cues, like someone unwrapping a piece of gum, can become associated with their most hated sounds and turn into really strong triggers in their own right. So if you are a highly sensitive person, you need to learn how to control your reactions to stimulation. If you feel yourself getting overwhelmed, you need to identify and minimize other sources of sensory stimulation, like bright lights or visual clutter. In other words, don't do one stimulating thing after another without giving yourself a quiet moment to recover. What happens if you find yourself stuck in the environment that's too loud, and you can't get out? One thing that experts suggest is to try attention switching. For example, you can count the different colors that you see around you. The idea is to intentionally shift your focus away from that disturbing noise. You can also try paced breathing. This is when you would inhale for 4 counts and exhale for 6, or some sort like that. It's believed to counteract that fight or flight instinct by activating the relaxation response of the parasympathetic nervous system. And if all else fails, you can invest in a big bag of corn nuts because people aren't usually upset by the sounds that they make themselves. So if you pop a corn nut in your mouth, you're not going to hear anything over your own crunching, which is probably not going to bother you so much. So I hope this has been helpful, especially if you are a highly sensitive person or someone who suffers from auditory issues, or if you have someone in your family or close to you who does. If you like this episode, I would ask that you share it and subscribe to my channel. Please be sure to tune into my Facebook page at 10 a.m. Eastern on Saturday mornings for Saturdays with Stephanie. I hope to see you guys there. Bye-bye.